Batman Arkham Knight, Assassin's Creed, Spider-Man, God of War, Ghost of Tsushima, the original Dying Light, Horizon Zero Dawn, Days Gone. What do all these games have in common? I think Far Cry 5 also has it, and probably countless other games that are completely escaping me right now. Well, I'll tell you, besides having my social life at its mercy at one point in time, all of these games have a new game plus. And not just any new game plus, but a new game plus that makes actual sense. I've said it in my last video on Dying Light 2, incorporating a mode that allows you to replay the story and carry over gear, abilities, resources, stuff you've acquired over a 20 to 40 plus hour long journey, I'm sure is not easy, and takes quite a bit of time and careful consideration for things like balancing for both yourself and your enemies. The decision to allow enemies that you'd normally run into late game to be faced off earlier, and in some cases even at the start of the game, are all things that gotta be taken into account. Not to mention every single resource, upgraded forms of gadgets, weapons, gears, or strictly just the baseline abilities that you acquire. I'd also say based off that particular game and its strengths, or what the devs are really going for, and how that game's community to a degree have received it, has an effect on what the new game plus is meant to provide. In other words, let's start beating around the bush, because we are pretty much talking about Dying Light 2 here. This game's new game plus makes absolutely zero sense to me. I'd argue that it's almost downright pointless. Why do I say that? Well, besides sounding like a typical ungrateful gamer with these devs literally proving they can't get anything right, and each passing update gets me closer and closer to having to expose my fragile gamer boy body to the sun, filling me with the rage only the devs The Last of Us 2 can understand, I'm saying this because for Techland, it seems a little unself-aware. Let me explain why. Dying Light 2 and its predecessor aren't really story-driven games. The world, dynamic day-night cycle, the ability to dropkick all your problems into oblivion, and create a machete that's both electric and fire-wielding off of some exposed wires and a makeshift blowtorch attached via only duct tape is why we're all here. At least that's why I'm here. It's what this game does, and it's what this game does incredibly well, especially compared to how it does the narrative. Plus, getting around by just parkouring off rooftops is both novel and amazing to do. The story in the original game was okay. It gets the job done, it does have some memorable moments, sure, but it's not at the top of most people's lists as to why you should play that game. The sequel, while leagues above its predecessor in storytelling, is still not why I'm coming to this game. Sure, it may be enough to keep me invested in the game's world and lore. Sure, the characters across the board are way easier to get invested in now than they were before, as it should be, but I'm still here for the badass parkour moves and makeshift weaponry. Techland and their new game plus have, for whatever reason, made the decision to relock your Night Runner tools back to the story. In other words, your gear, 99% of your weapons, your blueprints and upgraded stuff like lockpicks, medkits, molotovs, C4, grenades, pretty much anything that's not a Night Runner tool like the paraglider, grappling hook, or UV flashlight, or the crossbow that's tied to giving enough districts of the PKs, are all relocked and reset. Meaning you get to run through the story again for two reasons. Because you either love the story that much to redo it, maybe you want to see alternate choices at particular milestones, which makes sense. It fits with this game's idea of multiple playthroughs and seeing how you can reshape your personal version of Villador, this time with a slight step ahead with some of your gear and gadgets already upgraded. But it's also a missed opportunity on Techland's part that also adds to my confusion on the decision to lock the Night Runner tools, which I'll get into in just a second. The other reason is you probably didn't know that this would happen, and now you gotta make a beeline to the endgame content to unlock everything again. And then you realize that all your Night Runner tools are actually reset, meaning you have to find all of your military tech again in order to be able to upgrade them all over again. For some players, that's cool, all that military tokens to start recollecting. For me, I see it as a pointless grind, filler content, redoing something that I think probably should have just been given to us in a new game plus. So what's the problem here? Why am I bitching about a handful of tools? Well, considering these are items that drastically change your playstyle both in traversal and in combat, and particularly the grappling hook is given to you once you're practically 80% through with the story, and then I have to redo my commitment to the PKs in order to reacquire the crossbow. When it's all said and done, I find myself to be in the exact same position I was in prior to the addition of New Game Plus. I find myself beating most of the content again with some extra time devoted to resource scavenging to max out my other items like lockpicks, UV flares, and molotovs. And since they're close to being maxed out, I'm obviously spending much more time collecting a growing number of infected heads to the resources. I'm not complaining there. I'm simply saying that's the slight deviation from New Game Plus to my original playthrough. And since I've already beaten the story and multiple other saves, I'm just pretty much rushing through the story to get those tools again. It would have made much more sense to let us keep these tools, and in the New Game Plus, there's added benefits to each one. A little while back, they nerfed how the grappling hook used to behave. Why not in the New Game Plus, we have to upgrade it one more time, and it gets restored to its previous glory. Added benefits like this to each particular Night Runner tool, I think would have have really separated the New Game Plus from other game saves. Or in the case of the PK's crossbow, why not let me keep it and be able to side with all the survivors so that way I can create my own Villador that completely rids itself of the PK presence. It seems counterintuitive to a game whose intentions is to keep the player invested and continuously coming back, to then add in a mode that really doesn't provide too much other than spare you from the opening hours of getting your blueprints upgraded past the first initial stages. Besides this weird decision to lock them, latest updates I think have been great. Banshees appear more, although I think they should still be seen a little bit more frequently. Volatiles actually appear in the streets in certain areas, or even on random rooftops here or there, which fighting them without having to deal with the chase meter is fun and challenging in this game. It's not too much because you're not dealing with a level 3, level 4 chase that's steadily increasing with more and more volatiles and even virals appearing out of the blue. I just don't really understand the mentality of locking these items, especially where in the end you basically find yourself in the same position you were in prior to this mode being added. It seems very redundant, but let me know what you guys think. Was it a good idea on Techland's part to restrict the Night Runner tools back to the story? In Dying Light 2's sense, how important is balance and flow of the story in the New Game Plus? I want to leave you with that question because, again, they did this out of fear of disrupting the flow of the story, but does that really matter when you've already experienced the story once? And that's not the primary reason that we're really playing it. At least it's secondary to the gameplay itself. I also believe they locked the crossbow to potentially being too powerful in the player's arsenal. You know, to have the districts lined with the survivors' airbags, zip lines, and other parkour tools, and then have the PK's crossbow might be a little too much, but that's just me trying to make sense out of that decision. Again, doesn't really make that much sense to me. But let me know what you guys think down below. Have you given the New Game Plus a try? How do you feel about how it's been implemented? Do you think it's been handled correctly? Is it exactly what you wanted? Let's talk below. I'm genuinely curious. Like always, guys, my name is Cynic. Thank you all so much for watching, but until next time, see you all later.